A good evening to you. Kerry is always telling lies. And the last thing he said was a lie, and you know it was a lie too. As I come, and I really am coming to the end of my electoral career, I really am. I greatly relish this opportunity to visit the family of the Barbados Labour Party and to thank you personally. And this is part of the mission on which I am embarked. I'm speaking in a constituency that was represented by Grantley Adams. And I count it precious that no one has led the Barbados Labour Party longer than me, but Grantley Adams. And this evening I have come through you, the family of the Barbados Labour Party, to thank the people of Barbados for this opportunity, but more especially so to thank the family of the Barbados Labour Party for having allowed me the opportunity of this political career. You must believe me when I tell you that to have shouldered the responsibility of leadership as long as I have would have been a burden were it not for the tremendous support of the entire family of the Barbados Labour Party. And that no matter where I went, no matter how far away I was, that I could have shouldered the burden of leadership because wherever I went, I could hear the distant sound of the people of the Barbados Labour Party cheering me on. And I've come to these meetings in part just in person to say thank you. And to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for the tremendous support that has been given to me by the family of the Barbados Labour Party over 30 years in politics. And I also am using these opportunities to speak to thank constituencies like St. Joseph and to thank Dale Marshall, not just for the 30 years, but for the tremendous support in my second time around as the leader of the Barbados Labour Party, but for the work in the last elections. I would not have had the opportunity to come to you and say that I found the last election exhilarating. It is one thing to be in a position of Viv Richards to lead a team that has in a Malcolm Marshall, a Michael Holden, a Garner, and the others. And I suppose that in 1994, I was in that position. I know what it was to lead a party with some of the titans of the Labour Party. A Bernard St. John and a Henry Ford and a Billy Miller, a Louis Tull, Cheltenham, and the young stalwarts on the way up, the Liz Thompson and Toppin and Mae Motley. That was my team in 94. And when you have that kind of theme, then leadership comes easy. But I was exhilarated by the last campaign to lead a team without the titans, with 13 persons facing the polls for the first time. And it was a magnificent effort. And I've come to thank them and to tell them to hold up their heads and they have nothing to be embarrassed nor ashamed about. And that it was a magnificent effort by a young team and that I've come, really come, I will not stop speaking to give them the encouragement to go on and to go on and to go on. And the Labour Party needs to be told these things at this time. And I've also come, as it says, to let you know that even if I'm leaving electoral politics, I am never going to leave the Barbados Labour Party. That said, I'm beginning to read some very interesting things about what is supposed to happen in St. Peter when I go. And for those who need to hear, let me serve a warning. The St. Peter Labour Party branch of the Barbados Labour Party is one of the most feisty or feistiest, as in Jamaica, set of people that you will ever have to deal with. I have had a career in politics because the constituency branch of St. Peter knew who they wanted and was prepared to tell the leader of the Barbados Labour Party at the time that don't mind who you want, we know who we want. In 1983, Tom Adams had a view that ministers had to face the polls and that the person who he wanted to run in St. Peter was O'Brien Trotman. The St. Peter branch said, but we know who we want. There were others as well who wanted to run. I remember Dr. Waldo Ramsey wanted to run as well. And he went down to St. Peter and spoke. The branch was very polite, invited him to speak. And when he finished, Miss Alma Paris, the soul of the branch, she was very quiet. She said, Dr. Ramsey, you just gave a speech as if you are running for something. What are you running for? He said, don't you know that if you were our candidate, the Democratic Labour Party will find a big black dog, put it on the platform, the dog will say, bow, wow, wow, and we will lose this seat. And that was the end of his candidature. And I want to make the point that to warn the Barbados Labour Party that I know St. Peter when it was in the near the grass of the Democratic Labour Party, we were at -1. I believe it as the safest seat in Barbados for the Labour Party. I warn you that there are people in St. Peter who are as constant as the Northern Star. I've had the same election agent, not changing my election agent since 1984. I've had the same campaign manager since 1984. This election, some people suggested that the people who have nominated me should change, and there was almost a riot because they are constant in their loyalty. And St. Peter is a very interesting place. There's a place, for example, called Lonesome Hill. It is called Lonesome Hill because it is far. And there may be people who would like to feel that St. Peter is a safe seat. I want to find themselves down there, but they do not know where Lonesome Hill is because it is far. And there's a place called the Baltic. The Baltic is a lovely little village perched on a hill overlooking the Atlantic. It is called the Baltic because it gets very cold at night. And when we have public meetings down there, there are some who come, and there are some who I have never seen. And it will be to the people of the Baltic and the people of Lonesome Hill to say who will be the next candidate for St. Peter. But they will have a view that they trust the Barbados Labour Party will respect. And this evening I have perhaps come to make one point first. Don't take St. Peter for granted. St. Peter is not open for business for political carpetbaggers. It is not open to business for political opportunists. It is not open to business for people who could not tell you where Lonesome Hill is, or who would suffer from political hypothermia, is the word, if they had to find themselves in the Baltic. But I pledge to you that my interest in serving will continue, and I will serve the people of St. Peter this term, and I will continue to serve the Barbados Labour Party as long as God gives me health and strength. So that if I felt I had 10 more years in politics in me, I would be able to tell you that I could continue on and on and on. But I have to be sensible, and I'm being sensible about it. And there's not going to be any revision of opinion. There comes that moment. There comes that moment. And this moment is my moment. Now, I will continue to be with you. And I will be continue to be with you because our Barbados needs the Barbados Labour Party more than ever. And our Barbados needs a Barbados Labour Party that is engaged, that is dynamic, that is true to the principles that caused it to be founded in these fields and hills beyond recall more than 75 years ago. Our country is facing a crisis that may be different in nature, but perhaps is even more more difficult in severity than the crisis which inspired Grantley Adams to leave the comfort of a professional career and to take the people's side 75 years ago. Now, societies have failed. In nature, species have become extinct. And societies fail and species become extinct when the environment, their habitat change. And they have to make an adaptation. But they're either unwilling or too slow to make that adaptation. This country is facing a crisis that is not just about international recession. Part of it is obviously self-imposed, and Kerry Simmons has, without my having to do so, painted a very important picture that this government can't tell you that they are hapless victims of international situation that does not exist, that they are being innocent, passive bystanders, and that nothing that has happened in Barbados in the last 6 years can be attributed to anything by this government. That the 60% increase in water rates and the 65% increase in electricity prices caused by them that has run tourism down, that the increase in the excise tax by 50%, the increase in the value-added tax, the virtual robbery of people by taking away their allowances and the increase in the taxes, that all of these things done by the government had no effect and didn't matter. So we know differently. But Barbados is also caught up in a situation in which the environment within which our development has taken place has changed. And in 2009, if you remember, I gave a lecture to the students at the University of the West Indies. And it says that our country was facing a situation where you had effectively, like, it was like 4 trains running together to crash at the same point. And that if the government was going to pursue the policies we're going to pursue, that you're going to have international recession, you have domestic recession caused by international factors, followed by domestic recession caused by domestic factors. But the crisis is real. The crisis is real in a country when no part of the economy is doing well. We have come to live on tourism. And when Barbados tourism is not only the worst performing in the Caribbean, but this year alone has fallen by almost 10%. Tourism not performing, manufacturing not performing, sugar industry not performing, international business not performing. As I said, you have an economy that is no longer becoming viable. But more to the point, unlike other Caribbean countries, we do not have a lot to fall back on. But the problem is bigger than that. The problem becomes perhaps insurmountable when the people who have a responsibility to deal with it go into denial. This government is in denial. And when a leader of a country can be telling you at this time that our problems are because of factors beyond our control, international recession. When the governor of the central bank keeps alluring you with foolishness about how things are stable because he's saying the foreign exchange every day. As you know, in your own personal circumstances, your biggest problem isn't that you get sick from time to time. Your biggest problem is become if you get sick and refuse to do anything about it. You know, y'all ever heard the limerick about the faith healer of Deal? This is from the sort of that. And it goes to say there was a faith healer of Deal who said, although pain is not real, when I sit on a pin and it punctures my skin, I dislike what I fancy I feel. This government is like a man who has sat on a pin. He said, but pain isn't real, but I dislike what I fancy I feel. And our biggest problem in Barbados is that it's precisely this. Not that there's a crisis, but that the people who are supposed to be leading us out to the crisis are asking you to imagine that there is no crisis of sorts, that it is somebody else's fault. And rather than act with urgency, now, there is a dangerous, dangerous drift in the affairs of this country. And you know, I speak to you as I will continue to speak for the rest of my political career. From the perspective of a person who perhaps has seen it all. I am a trained economist, but I have not only lived the economic experience by training. I have lived it. And I remember being in Jamaica in the 1970s. And I warn you that when things are allowed to drift, and you have a situation where there's no growth in the country for 5 years, and a government begin to worship a false ideology, that you can have a decline that can take a generation to correct. And perhaps sometimes the decline is so great that you can't come back. And I warn you, when I went to Jamaica in 1971, Jamaica was more developed than Barbados. The first time I saw a shopping mall was when I saw the shopping malls in Halfway Tree in Jamaica. It's true. But then Jamaica went into a situation not dissimilar from that which we're facing now, where between 1974 and 1979, 5 years of no growth. And you allow an economy to drift down for 5 years. Hard to bring it back. In 1966, on independence, Guyana was more developed than Singapore. Guyana was the most developing country in the world. And Barbadians who sometimes laugh at Guyanese have to remember that our initial spurt of development was made possible by Guyanese capital. Banks Bury was a Guyanese investment in Barbados. And there was a time when our manufacturing industry was Guyanese. But you have a period of protracted decline. And nothing is done about it. And it takes you a generation at least to bring it back. And the same false ideologies that I have heard of in my time as a practicing economist, I hear of here today in Barbados. There is no person in the world, certainly there was no person in the Caribbean, who more strongly believed in setting lofty goals for the society. If Randall Stewart believed that it is about building a society, he should have heard Michael Manley. And I was there. And sometimes it is possible to listen to people who were there. And I remember sitting in the National Planning Agency in the mid-1970s with my other fellow economists. And Michael Manley was speaking about his wish to transform the Jamaican society. And he was responding to urgent issues that some of which we don't understand. We don't know what it is to have a country that has adult illiteracy. But in Michael Manley's time, about 60% of Jamaica were illiterate. We don't know what it is to live in a society where you don't have compulsory primary and secondary education, but in Jamaica they didn't have that. And he had this concept that he expressed once at the end of a budget speech. He says that from this moment and hereafter, there will be free and compulsory primary education in Jamaica. There will be free and compulsory secondary education in Jamaica. And there will be free and compulsory university education in Jamaica. And all of us looked at each other in astonishment because there was nothing in the budget to pay for it. And I remember the opposition spokesman on education jumping over the rails of Parliament to Edwin Allen to go and shake his hands. So wonderful was the concept of the new society. But there was nothing happening in the economy to pay for it. And Barbados has become, above all else, a victim of this fraudulent ideology that you're building a society, you're not interested in building an economy, as if you can build a society without building an economy. And if we don't wake up, we will go the same way of so many who believe that they have powers that I think that only the Almighty have, that you can convert water into wine or feed large multitudes with 5 loaves and 4 small fishes. But Frandel, those powers are vested in the Almighty. They are not vested in me nor you. And if you want to feed multitudes, go and get enough fish and enough bread. Build a strong economy. And we are at that moment where we are not a victim of any global recession. It is in the mind. It is in a government that believes that people will continue forever to be passive because we accept the nonsense, that we are hapless bystanders, that we are not firm craftsmen of our fate, and that we are the victim of a folly. That you can pay too much attention to building an economy if you just say that you're building a society. And what does building a society entails? There's no, and perhaps we don't have to begin to address this in a serious way too. There's been no grand social engineering by the Democratic Labour Party. In December 2007, I said then what I ought to continue to say now, that the Democratic Labour Party has not done anything of significance in this country since 1974. They introduced national insurance. Barrow got tired, went on sabbatical, came back and lost the election. They picked it back up in 1986, came with the 15,000. What did they do between 86 and 91? They led us into the Holocaust, built an arch. Sanford was clear that he was going to do nothing that will cause the DLP to commit political suicide. And then they come back in 2008, found $2.8 billion in reserves, a country going after 14 years, unemployment at 6.7%. We took up this country and showed that we can find a country in the darkest days and bring it into the light. And what have they done since then? Take a good economy, the best performing economy in the Caribbean, a country that had become the world's smallest developed society, and now have converted us into the worst performing economy in the Caribbean, and in many respects, an object not of laughing stock, but of pity now. We are the worst performing tourism economy in the Caribbean, and we depend upon tourism. And is this the Barbados? Every time the Democratic Party takes power in this country now, because they have this mindset that Barbados belongs to them because they led us into independence, that they do not feel like we feel, that you have to overachieve to merit the people's confidence, that they just turn up and says, we here. And I spoke last week about this country caught up in what I call a contaminated moral environment. And it needs to be spoken about because Kerry spoke about it again. There has to be something wrong in a country. When people can ask you to support them for doing things that they know they are not going to do. And they know that they're doing things and they're condemning the things that they're doing and blame it on somebody else. They call it a contaminated moral environment. And in the Democratic Labour Party, why are we arguing about privatization? If you read, as you should read, the medium-term fiscal strategy of the Democratic Labour Party, it is not only in there as divestment, but they commit even to selling government's land. That is a commitment. The Democratic Labour Party in the last term privatized parts of the gems of Barbados. They passed it over to Bernie Redhead to run. They have sold the remaining of our shares in the ICB. They privatized also the Insurance Corporation of Barbados. And Chris Sinclair, in all fairness to him, said they have already agreed with the IDB to privatize the National Housing Corporation. And I do not deal with rumors, but it is only a matter of time that an institution that is not getting money from the budget is giving away the houses free. So its revenue is going. It's taken on hundreds of people because Michael Ashley has staffed the national housing with large numbers of people. It is only a matter of time, and I'm not wishing it. Not wishing it. But it has to be something wrong when people are privatizing, but say that they will never privatize. And the politics of fear in Barbados must stop. There are a lot of people in the last election who legitimately so feel that if you have to take tough policies that they might lose their jobs. And that is what Chris Sinclair was precisely trying to pander to when he said that myself, Tyrone Barker, Wood, and Clyde Maskell had conceived a secret plot to send home 10,000 people. The people of Barbados have to be called to a higher calling. And that you can't build a country on the psychology of fear. This country needs to have serious, strong goals set for it again. And among those serious, strong goals, we have to stop making ourselves the victim of a set of numbers. Something called a medium-term fiscal strategy. You know, if I agree with Friend Stewart, this is one thing. That you can't just set the circumstances of a serious society in terms of a few numbers that you fiddle with. There has to be more about societal development and organization than that. We set goals. I said we had to live in a country where the ordinary man and ordinary woman felt that the eradication of poverty was a goal of the government of Barbados. We set the goal of full employment for this country. I felt that with the right policy, and I still feel so, that a country like Barbados can aim for full employment. We virtually reached there. I also set the goal for this country that we should have full development. We left government with Barbados rated by the UNDP as the world's smallest developed country on the strength of the quality of life. Nobody should set a country's goals as meeting a medium-term fiscal, a set of numbers. And it is time that the bankruptcy of that overall approach is recognized. But that it is also recognized that the medium-term strategy, even if you accept it as the only strategy, has failed. And that it is time that we replace it not just with another set of numbers, but this evening I've come to say that there's need for this country to be presented with a plan for recovery, not a revision of the medium-term fiscal strategy. The people of Barbados yearn for progress. That is why they are willing to believe the best about a government, even though the government may be a bad government. The people want this country to succeed. And it's about time that this country is presented with a plan for its recovery. It must involve, first of all, the change in government's fiscal approach. Last week, I made the point, and I make the point again. The single most important thing that must be done is that the government of Barbados must stop believing that it can borrow $1.2 billion every year and seek to raise that $1.2 billion by issuing bonds and debentures that are junk. Sadly, we have reached that stage. The government every year now is seeking to borrow over $1 billion. $1 billion in borrowing is a lot of money. But that's what this government is seeking to borrow this year. But it is seeking to borrow in circumstances where the bonds, where the ratings agencies have decided that the instruments by which the government is seeking to borrow money is junk. And there are a lot of investors who are forbidden, even by law, to take up people's money and invest them in junk. So that there has to be a recovery program where tough choices are faced that stop the government from having to borrow $1.2 billion a year when they know that that process cannot continue because the market is telling you, don't come. Has to stop. And look, the members of the media who have to be spoken to, this business that the Labour Party has to come and say, cut what, cut this, cut that. Governments exist to govern. And you go back in a parliamentary democracy and account to the people for the decisions that you make. And Barbados can be no different to any other country in the world. The government asks for a mandate to govern. It must make the decisions that it has to make, explain them to the people, and then if the people are satisfied with it, see a mandate upon the basis of what it has done. But what it cannot do is to continue to allow our circumstances to remain in this situation of drift. and our people's future being not just mortgaged but destroyed by a government that has this insatiable demand for credit that can no longer viably be met because the instruments by which the government is seeking to raise loans in Barbados are now rated as, not my judgment, as junk. Secondly, the government has to start fixing back the productive sectors. Kerry spoke about tourism. Other Caribbean countries are doing well with tourism, facing the same circumstances as we are facing. But this government has starved the tourism sector of marketing resources. But let me ask you, you are not a minister of finance, but you're sensible people. If you were the minister of finance or the government, what are the two things that the tourism sector uses that it can't pass on the cost? But you use a lot of water and a lot of electricity. So you increase water by 60%, and you increase electricity by 65%. That goes straight to the cost of tourism. And then you increase the excise tax on things like liquor. Now, for you and I, liquor is a luxury. But for the tourism sector, it is an input. I saw the numbers, the Jamaicans who wanted to invest in Casuarina. They showed me the numbers that things that cost X in Jamaica cost twice as much. The same product imported because of the excise. And then you increase the VAT on them from 15 to 17 and a half. And the property taxes go up. So you do everything to make your most important sector more uncompetitive. Then the sector has to discount to attract people. And what you have? A sector faced with rising costs, falling revenues, and 30 properties close. There has, therefore, to be a reversal of those fundamentally foolish policies that have driven our productive sectors into the ground. And if, like me, you believe it is tourism and international business, I used to tell people that running a small country was a hard thing, but also an easy thing. As Prime Minister, I did not have to bother about maintaining the nuclear armaments, nor our Navy on the seas, but do the few things that you have to do and keep doing them well. Fix tourism. Fix international business. And Kerry, you have to give lectures on this. Because even the government-owned people tell them that just government inertia alone cost this country 2,700 jobs in international business and $2 billion in investments and capital. But fix those two sectors. Start making some institutional changes. There are things, and somebody has to talk about a program for recovery. There are things that Barbados is not helpless nor hapless. There are things that can be done that don't cost a lot of money that must be done. Read our manifesto. There's a thing called the World Bank Ease of Doing Business survey. It surveys all the countries in the world. And there are some places, there are some sectors like international business where the conditions for doing business will decide whether you get investment or activity. How long it takes to register a company, for example. These things matter. Are you not aware, not only are we at the bottom of the pile in relation to tourism, but the World Bank has just published the ease of doing business conditions for countries in the world. St. Lucia has the best conditions for doing business in the Caribbean. It is rated number 58. St. Vincent is ahead of us. Dominica is ahead of us. Barbados is 88th. The conditions for doing business in Barbados, based upon the 9 set of criteria rated by international institutions. We are number 43rd in terms of human resource development, but the conditions for doing business in this country are among the worst in the Caribbean. And you read our manifesto, it says that if we had gotten this government all now, there would have been a unit of business facilitation in this country. Because why? The country that is the best country that has the best conditions for doing business is not a big country. It is Singapore. It has the best conditions for doing it. Easy to do business there. And if you create the best conditions for doing business, business will come. We can get back capital to this country if you create the best conditions for doing business. It don't require an increase in the value-added tax. And I would have loved the opportunity to show it could be done. That I would have said, these are the benchmarks. And within a predictable period of time, we are going to match places like Singapore. So that when people have to make a choice as to where I'm going to carry my business, I look to Barbados. But down in the Caribbean, they're looking to St. Lucia, Dominica, St. Vincent, Grenada. They're better than us. Are we the children of Sisyphus? Is this what we have come to? Are our people to sing Jehovah's song now in a strange land? Are we now leaderless? We need to stop putting our faith in a piece of nonsense called a medium-term fiscal strategy that has failed. We are the victims of failed policies by a failed Minister of Finance in a failed government. And we have to find new ways of doing new things within the context of a program for the recovery of this country. And it can be done. And the voice of the Labour Party has to be heard saying that it can be done. And you know, in my cabinet, I used often to stop cabinet and ask the question, is this what we got elected to do? And in St. Joseph, that gave us Grantley Adams, I have to ask this evening the question, if Grantley was here, what would he ask and what would he say? And Grantley Adams' life tells me that he will be saying that at some stage there has to be not just a sacrifice, but somebody has to speak about a shared sacrifice. Grantley Adams' political career was one in which a man who could comfortably had a lucrative profession as a lawyer made the sacrifice to fight on behalf of the people. And he gave up wealth and income. And there are those of us who have followed in that footstep that believe that public service is a duty and is more rewarding than wealth. But Barbados has come to a stage not only where there must be a program for recovery, but somebody must speak to the need for shared sacrifice. There has to be a commitment that all of us have to bring it back from going over the brink. And the principles of Aristotle must hold. That as between equals equality, but as between unequals proportionality. And those who are in a better position to carry the sacrifice must be asked to carry a bigger part of the burden. And that's what I'm saying by shared sacrifice. And this country's circumstances cannot be cured unless a leader speaks about what is the nature of the sacrifice that is required now to save this country, and what is expected of the government, and what is expected of the citizens of this land. And that is what is missing from this landscape. And I say to you that this shared sacrifice must begin in George Street. It must begin among the ranks of Tuscany. The Democratic Labour Party cannot ask the people of this country for sacrifice if they continue to believe that our resources must be used to pay for the political programs of the Democratic Labour Party. The Democratic Labour Party should have no difficulty knowing where to start making the cuts. The cuts have to start in the political programs that are fleecing the Treasury, that have no productive impact whatsoever, but intended entirely and only to support the partisans programs of the Democratic Labour Party. The most disgraceful supplementary that has ever been brought to Parliament was brought at the end of the estimates this year. When, at the end of winter, the Democratic Labour Party brought the supplementary to pay for the summer camps. Now, why say that? That these summer camps are, when it was a boy, we used to do our own summer camps. We used to contrive of things to make ourselves active. But these summer camps are about creating these contracts for DLP persons to get thousands of dollars to make sandwiches and to prepare hot dogs. That's what it is about. And that means at the end of the financial year, you bring a big supplementary for summer camps. Somebody benefiting. And that is what it's about. The biggest single increase in the public expenditure this year is the 60% increase in the bushing. And when you read Errol Barr's mirror image speech, he says, he asks the Democrat Leader, what mirror image should you have of yourself? He says our mirror image should be like Singapore. He says the Prime Minister of Singapore is not training people to cut down bush, but the descendants, political descendants of Errol Barr. Biggest single increase in expenditure by the government of Barbados. A 60% increase in Dennis Low's ministry to cut down bush by the side doers. All these things, the sacrifice must be made. That is, this country cannot afford not to have money to pay civil servants. And people at national housing are like fowls in a snake pit. They're fearful that their time has come. But you got money to spend on fanciful political competitions. Cut these things. They may not be a lot, but the message of shared sacrifice must go forward. And it must come from the leadership of this country. And the people of Barbados cannot be asked to tighten the belt anymore if the Democratic Labour Party just continue to use the taxpayers' money to pay for their political program. They got to stop. And let us begin to talk about how we ourselves can make the sacrifice, but the government must lead the way. And you know, if Grantley Adams was here, he would be talking not just about sacrifice, but that we must go forward under conditions of social justice. And our Barbados must never be a place where some, the many, the multitude, are made to be satisfied with less than enough, while the few are now dissatisfied with more than all. And these things are happening in our land. And that's why we say we need a Labour Party whose voice is full and fulsome. That you can't have a situation where small contractors cannot get work, but contracts are being contrived to give this small person 1,000 houses now and 2,000, and they must get paradise, and they must get this, and they must get that. We cannot live in a land of deprivation, coexisting with inequality. It can't be right. Barbados must not be a land where the majority are made to be satisfied with less than enough, and I represent a constituency where people are suffering. But in that same constituency, there are people who are dissatisfied with more than all. And all of the work that has been done in my constituency in the last 5 years has been done by one company. And that got to be wrong. And Grantley Adams will be talking about the need to restore social justice to Barbados. So that we need, in the Labour Party, to be talking about serious things. That we are ready to talk about a program for recovery. We are no lesser than Singapore, all the other small countries in the world that face these circumstances and find their way forward. They are not stopping, they're finding their way through. Our mirror image cannot be Greece and Turkey. Barbados does not love, we are not a case of misery-loving company. We must not now begin to sing Jehovah's song in a strange land. Believe that we can't make it, and that we're looking for every little tawdry excuse for why we can't be an oasis of progress too. And this is the message that the Labour Party must, in St. Joseph and elsewhere, be resolute in bringing before the people of this country. And you know, I've had, as I said, 30 splendid years in public life. And once his breath and health with me, I will be wrong and my voice shall be heard. But I must tell you that I lived in Jamaica in the 70s. But Jamaica has something to fall back on. And that when things got tough in Jamaica, people could go to the country and get some yellow yams. I went down to the river and got some fish. And they live off the land. And in Guyana, it's the same thing. But we run the danger of believing that managing an economy does not matter. Have a crisis, but our problem is twofold. You're doing nothing about it, but you have nothing to fall back on. And I wish on Friday, when the government met the social partnership, that Chris Sinclair was there, but he was not there. I hope that he was out of the country. But the notion that somebody, you can talk to him, that you got to write him, is a large part of our problem. Nobody of you in this crowd would ordinarily believe that in a crisis, a buffoon, a blusterer like Chris Sinclair would be the person who leads us out of crisis. You won't believe that. But he's not prepared to talk to anybody now. So swollen is his head. And things are desperate. Things are desperate. And I say this, as it says, that in my 40 years, and I left postgraduate school as an economist with a master's degree 40 years ago. I've seen a lot in my time. Even now, I'm still learning my discipline as an economist and prepared to listen. But I tell you that I have seen a country in strife. And it is not a nice thing. And that strife, the crisis in this country, is not just real, but unless there's urgent action, there can be a great unraveling that will take a generation to fix. And that is why the voice of the Barbados Labour Party has to be heard. The Barbados Labour Party cannot be silent. The Barbados Labour Party cannot cooperate and be accomplices to an impending disaster. The Barbados Labour Party has to sound the warning that we have to be the constructive alternative and that we have to force action by the superior example of moral authority. And that when we speak to the public, we too may want, as some want us sometimes to do, to indulge in what I call moral destitution, to play politics with the welfare of 280,000 souls. But the Barbados Labour Party must never do that. That you can play politics and you can win too by saying one thing but meaning something else. Saying there's no need for stimulus, but you have a stimulus. Saying you don't believe in privatization, but you're practicing privatization. That is sinfulness. Because it is politicians playing with the welfare of 280,000 souls. And that's happened in my country. And it is our responsibility to call attention to it, to lead, to get it stopped. And that is why I have come this evening in the land of Adams to bring this message to you. And God bless you. And God bless your party now and forevermore.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard, I ain't get there yet. You've heard from 3 spokesmen, our representative, young Kerry Simmons, and